Hi, teachers. My name is Jennifer, and I'm here to get you started with teaching your students about artificial intelligence. So, this presentation is very quick and it's designed to get you going with having these important conversations with your students tomorrow. So, the way we're going to do this is I'm just front loading this presentation with some lesson resources that you could just turnkey tomorrow to your students to start having these conversations. And throughout this presentation, I want you to keep in mind that our role when it comes to educating our students about artificial intelligence is really to present information and facilitate critical conversations, because critical thinking and observing are going to be the most important skills that our students are going to have while they're navigating this space of artificial intelligence. We're going to start how I approach things with students is with ethics and bias. And I'll bring up some conversation points that you may want to bring into your classes. And then we'll end with just briefly reviewing one of my favorite tools to give students a practice when it comes to using artificial intelligence, and then a guide that we can use when deciding what level of AI are we going to use with our students. So, materials for getting you started. There's two different types of materials that I like for getting students started learning about artificial intelligence. The Applied Digital Skills module on introducing artificial intelligence with students. Discovering AI in daily life is a nice little module. It's great for a flipped lesson. You definitely want to make sure that you follow this up with your students as far as like continuing to have further conversations. But I really, really like the Common Sense Media 8 lesson unit on AI literacy. So, moving into this, my favorite lessons and probably the best ways, in my personal opinion, to get started is lesson one: what is AI? Lesson two: how is it trained? Because we're beginning to get into the data sets. And once we get into the data sets, we can go into lesson five: understanding AI bias, and then how bias affects our lives. So you'll find that this presentation kind of follows that step process. And I think this is a really nice way for you to start using this with your students and start educating them on how AI is a tool and not a solution. And I also want you to note that the time for each one of these is relatively short: 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. So there's more than adequate time for you to use the lessons that are here to start conversations that can go deeper and have much more of a richer impact later. Each one of the lessons comes with a video, lesson plan, student materials, and teacher materials. So I really like how they just took a lot of the guesswork out for teachers and just prepared everything. Common Sense is always really good for that. So, one of the reasons why I like to start off with ethics and bias is my experience with bias. And I just think this is an interesting kind of segue for you. So, very quickly, I wanted a picture of a robot in the background, a teacher in the foreground, the teacher on the floor with her kids working. And my idea was that I wanted the robot to be doing the minutia. So that way the teacher would be able to have these rich interactions with her students. But that's not what I got. That's certainly not what I got. I almost got it here. But when I asked AI, how could I do this better? I absolutely did not get that. So, what wound up happening while the AI here is in the background and the teacher is in the foreground, it totally negated the concept that I was trying to convey. And so, when I debriefed with the AI, what I found out was AI is also trained on the requests that it receives. So I was using DALI, and DALI is powered by ChatGPT 4. And the response I got basically was most likely what is happening is that people most frequently will request a picture of a robot as the main subject of an image. it's not used to having robots not be the primary subject of an image that's generated. So it's by default biased to giving me pictures where the robot is the main character in all the images. So that was my first experience really hitting a bias. And I thought this was a really great way for us to start having these conversations with our students. So I have stable diffusion and bias. Stable diffusion, there's many versions. It is a data set that is used to train AI on image generation. Now, I love the stable diffusion. Well, it's not stable diffusion, it's the diffusion bias explorer. So when I used the diffusion bias explorer and I looked for a scientist, a knowledgeable scientist, these are all the images that I got. If you take a look at these images, I'm sure you can make many observations about what the shortcomings of these images are. There are no females. There's looks like nobody of color. So, what we're getting in this biased image generation is the affirmation or the continued legacy of there can't be a female scientist, there can't be a scientist of color. This is a really powerful conversation to have with your students because we know that representation is very important. So, with your students, you can say, is this accurate? Are only white male scientists? How could this be harmful? Then moving forward, I decided I wanted to do educators. So when I did like an adjective like kind or sweet teacher, they were all female. Here I did outspoken teacher and I compared the data set of stable diffusion 1.4 and DALI 2. And you'll see some interesting things. Stable diffusion 1.4 gave me three females, one male, or DALI 2 gave me three males, one female. I think the outspoken thing is probably something that made DALI go to male, but I'm making guesses. I think the Diffusion Bias Explorer is a fantastic tool for you to use with your students when you can compare the different types of generative AI and how they might be perpetuating bias in our current society. So, again, this is just another tool, another way for us to have really interesting conversations and have students kind of drill deep and see, like, make requests of you. You can model this on the board and see what type of images it generates as far as what assumptions it's making. Now, another interesting thing, so you can have that diffusion explorer conversation one day, and then you can have another conversation about the overcorrecting for inclusion. So Google Gemini actually had to halt its image generative AI because it was making a lot of inaccurate assumptions because it was overcompensating for inclusion. So here you'll see the prompt was generate an image of a 1943 German soldier. And you could clearly see by the images here that maybe only one would be an accurate depiction of a 1943 German soldier, while the other ones are clearly not even possible, probably. So, again, this is another follow up conversation. Now, these are good bell ringers, also, just having these conversations. But, kids do like to talk and get their opinions out there. So, if you choose to use one of these as a conversation starter, be prepared for some really, really good, deep observations. Now, another conversation topic that we can have is where AI might go wrong in dealing with facial recognition. So, for example, this woman was wrongfully arrested for a crime when she was 38 weeks pregnant. She was arrested the day after the crime. The police showed up at her house and arrested her in front of her family, and it was obvious that she could not have committed the crime that she was accused of, and she was released. But This is important civics conversation for us to have with our students. Again, AI is a valuable tool, but it's not a solution. So, what are our understandings that we need to have moving forward when we use this type of tool? Where does it belong and where does it not belong? Having these kind of critical conversations are really going to help arm our students moving forward to be able to discern the right ways to use AI and perhaps not the right ways to use AI. So, with all those important conversation starters, what's a tool that our students can safely use to start interacting with AI? School AI is probably one of my favorite tools. The reason why is because I, as a teacher, get to control the experience my students are having, but they do get to interact with a chatbot. And it's a chatbot that I could train. So, for example, if I go to School AI, this is what it looks like. You have Sidekick. Sidekick is the chatbot. If you are in the free version of School AI, Sidekick is powered by ChatGPT 3. If you are on the pro account, Sidekick is powered by ChatGPT 4. Both versions are completely safe. There is no information that is stored on their servers, and it is not being trained on the student data. It is just simply forgetting everything once a teacher ends the experience, and the teacher is always in control. So Sidekick is something that you could just have students have open for your students to use. You could find a space if you're looking for a space for your students to use, like a bell ringer, a video explorer. I love how history comes to life, where you can have conversations with historical figures, or you can explore world history. But my favorite way to use this is when I go to the spaces that I've created under sessions. So, for example, under bias and ethics and artificial intelligence, this was something I was working with colleagues with, and we were all kicking around this particular space. And you can see that I had these adults all testing it out. And if I click on any one of my colleagues here, you'll see that I can click and see the entire exchange that the student is having with the chatbot. The chatbot can even organize things into groups, which I also find very helpful. So, using that tool for me is a nice way for students to just get a taste of what AI is like. Now, you want to take a look at spaces. They provide prompting advice. I have done several different prompts, but that is a whole different video. And School AI does provide a lot of help. So you can just start off with some of the spaces that are already pre made for you. And lastly, when you start to use artificial intelligence with your students, I'd highly suggest that you use something like this generative AI acceptable use scale. This came out of North Carolina, and it's a fantastic way for the teacher to maintain control and build understanding about what is acceptable use of AI and what is not, depending on the assignment. So you might have an assignment that is a level 2 where AI is okay to help assist on editing, or you might have an AI level 0 assignment where there's absolutely no AI that's going to be used. But the sooner we start articulating these conversations with our students, the better we're going to be off in the long run. And big kudos to North Carolina for putting this leveler out. I really, really appreciate it. So, my friends, you have your start. You can start with ethics. You can start with bias. You can start with common sense media lessons. I really appreciate how they started off with what is AI, the training data, and then going into bias. Or if you're looking for something as a quick introduction, you can go into the applied digital skills. And then from there, it's all about building conversations to remember that we're there to facilitate these and facilitate their critical analysis of the tool, remembering that artificial intelligence is a tool, it's not a solution. It's all based on probability. And with that, it could be a wonderful help for us in the classroom, but it is something that we have to use wisely. So I hope this was helpful. And if you're interested, please subscribe to get some more valuable information.